Why do stereotypes exist, and how do they relate to reality? We often say stereotypes are bad and should be avoided at all costs, destroyed and replaced with something that is better. They are too insensitive, we say, and can harm the people affected by them. Do we even know what this better alternative is? I'm not so sure, so I will try to define what stereotypes are, to help me, and hopefully you as well, better navigate around this term. The first definition for stereotype showing up on the search engine is a widely held but fixed and oversimplified image or idea of a particular type of person or thing. I have a few questions about this definition as a start. Widely held? At what point does it become widely held? 2 people, 10 people, a building, a village, a town, a country? That is not clear. If you are talking about stereotypes between towns, are you going to ignore that a similar dynamic is happening between households in each town? One is a bad stereotype and the other is okay? What significance does the scale of an oversimplified idea have, where it has to be given a different name? Which brings me to another few questions. Why does it have to be oversimplified to be a stereotype? What about just a simplified image? And why do we simplify in the first place? What is the limit, and who judges where a simplified image passes into the realm of being oversimplified? Do we have a golden standard of the truth by which to judge whether something is simplified more or less? That seems to be subjective, based on whether it is the stereotyper or the stereotypee judging. Therefore, the whole term becomes subjective as a result. You may have noticed that the term stereotype is used widely as if it is an objective concept. Most often, the stereotypees idea of when something is oversimplified becomes the standard by which the stereotyper must now change their idea. Should they do that always? It is just my hunch, but I think the stereotyper had a very good reason to create whatever simplification of whatever the simplified object. Otherwise, they would have gotten everything exact about the stereotypee in the first place. Why simplify it? The more information you have, the better you can manipulate the situation, right? It could be the case that another group of people was simplified just to have a simple, easily transferable block of knowledge between different people. For example, in business with another nation, it could be useful to know that another people prefer trading objects of a minimalist, monotone color design, because of the religious significance of colors in their particular culture. This bit of information is quite complex and would need a certain level of education, time and memory to comprehend. However, an oversimplification saying that they like dull things is much easier to remember and could, in general, contribute to more success in business, benefiting both groups. Is this kind of stereotype bad, considering its benefits? However, the most common scenario we hear about seems to be that it was the stereotyper's malicious intent which led them to oversimplify the stereotypee. They wanted to make them look bad, so instead of saying they are aggressive some of the time, they keep saying they are aggressive all the time. Instead of saying some of them are irrational some of the time, they called them all stupid. Instead of saying some of them wear clothes the same color as a pig's skin, they called them all pigs. We also hear stereotypees saying occasionally that the stereotype is not true at all, that it may not be a simplification, but just a straight lie instead. To understand the best way to treat this type of situation, I will look at the potential consequences of such a stereotype. So let's say we hear accusations that someone has been maliciously stereotyped, and the idea is spread among the stereotypers' population that the stereotypees generally or universally possess some negative trait. What problems could this cause? In the extreme case, we imagine a stereotyper killing or harming them because they believe the stereotypee deserves it for whatever trait they have been accused of, but do not actually have. What is the likelihood of this happening? Would the normal individual of the stereotyper group go to this extreme, unless they saw proof for the stereotype in the actual situation? Would a more violent member of the stereotypers be stopped of doing something violent to that or another being, by the suppression of this oversimplification present in society? Or would the violence come out in some way with or without the stereotype? What if the stereotype was suppressed by taboo, and the stereotypees, because they had a change in conditions, like becoming more poor suddenly, start fitting the stereotype again, which was suppressed beforehand? Would it not be better in that case if all people were aware of the stereotype, so they can take proper precautions in case of aggression, for example? Remember that, as I highlighted, a stereotype is subjective. Therefore, we are never entirely sure of the truth regarding other things or people. A perceived oversimplification can reveal itself to be a simplification instead, going wrong to right. The same way it can go the other way, from right to wrong, which people call stereotyping. Whichever way it seems to go, it is still subjective. There is still that uncertainty there about if it really is stereotyping, or is it a useful judgment in that particular case. What would you do before going out if you did not know the day would be hot or cold? Presumably, you would take with you clothes for both situations. In the same way, I conclude that it is necessary to keep both the so-called stereotype, in other words the negative simplification, as well as the non-negative simplification in mind, to ensure you are not blind to a potential threat or an opportunity. I hope you agree that keeping the possibility of something negative does not make you bad, as long as you keep in mind the flip side of that as well. You have not made a judgment, therefore you are not judgmental. You may have noticed that not many people talk about stereotypes as the flip side of a non-negative simplification. On the media and popular normal discourse, what tends to be implied is that the opposite of a stereotype is reality. Under this assumption, if you agree with the stereotype, you can be called anti-truth, liar, and possess malicious intent. This assumes that certainty can easily be achieved if you just believe certain things, when reality shows us the opposite every day, any time something unexpected happens. The element of uncertainty is with us everywhere, and nowhere more so than in large-scale societal interactions. I think all of us have been encouraged or have tried ourselves to ignore certain stereotypes, but, while it is hard to admit for some, I believe we still consciously or subconsciously consider them when we come into contact with whatever the stereotyped group is. If we see convincing evidence that the stereotype is true in a particular situation, that is only reasonable that we react to it in the best way possible, which also includes guarding our own interests. So taking all this in mind, I want to approach defining a stereotype from another side, one I believe is closer to truth, and could allow people to comprehend it in a more wholesome way. I think we need to look at simplification as the central concept, and get the stereotype as a subset of that. A simplification is any man-made interpretation of a reality, to be used as a basis for practical judgments. It may fit, partly fit, or not fit reality, and this always carries a level of uncertainty. Subjectively, a simplification may be judged by man as correct or incorrect. A simplification that is judged as incorrect may also be called an oversimplification. Such an incorrect simplification, if applied collectively to a group of people or other entities, can be called a stereotype. As it is subjective, a stereotype may be judged as existing or not existing by different people, and a fully objective judgment by man is not possible. I would be glad to hear your thoughts about my definition of a stereotype, and if you agree with me, or if not, then why not? On a side note, while thinking about this topic, I also thought about the construction of the word oversimplification. As an opposite, is there an undersimplification of reality possible? Let me know your thoughts about this as well.